Welcome to Chaplain's Word of the Day. God's Word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I'm Chaplain Otis Corbett, and I invite you to explore a portion of the Bible with me today. Today I want to share a word about John Q. Prodigal as I comment on Matthew 16, verses 13 through 25. This passage reads, When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? So they said, Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But he said to them, Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered and said, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered and said to him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he commanded his disciples that they should tell no one that he was Jesus the Christ. From that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised the third day. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Today, as we continue in a series of devotionals about the prodigals of the Bible, we're introduced to Peter, whom I call John Q. Prodigal. You see, Peter is Mr. Everyman. He is Mr. John Q. Public. Peter was a hardworking man. He was a husband. He was a son-in-law. He had religious faith. He had political convictions, and he had personal weaknesses like we all do. Peter was an ordinary, everyday kind of guy. And as we shall see today, he was also a prodigal. So look with me at Peter today and consider that as we do, we might be looking at a mirror into our own souls. First, like many of us, Peter was a seeker. He was seeking something more in life. Now, how do we know that? Well, the Bible tells us that Peter immediately left his boat and his net when Jesus called him. And according to John's Gospel, Peter stayed with Jesus even when many other less dedicated followers had fallen away. He stayed with Jesus all the way up until the Garden of Gethsemane, and then he fell and he made a mistake then, but until that time he had dedicated himself to Jesus. So we can see he was a seeker, and we also can see that he was a seeker in his rebuke of Jesus. See, now that he had found something, or rather someone, who had transformed his life, who filled that place in his life that nothing else could fill, he did not want to give him up. Why was Peter a seeker? Well, for the same reasons we're all seekers today. We all have a God-shaped hole in our souls that needs to be filled, and only God can fill that hole. Now, like many of us, Peter thought he found what he needed. Now, the problem is Peter was lost. He was confused. Now, being lost without knowing you're lost is a critically dangerous situation. And you must know where you are before you can travel to where you want to go. If an airplane pilot doesn't know where he is or she is, they can easily fly into a mountain or have some other disaster happen. So you have to know where you are before you can go where you want to go, and you have to know you're lost before you try to get found. Once on a land navigation course, a friend of mine had plotted on a map where he thought that he was. Then he followed the instructions given to him almost exactly, but he still ended up at the wrong place. Now, why? Because he wasn't at the correct starting point. And Peter was not at the correct starting point with Jesus. He was confused about who he'd found because he started from the wrong place. Now, we can't look into Peter's soul, but because Peter was Mr. Everyman, Mr. John Q. Public, or John Q. Prodigal, I can imagine some wrong starting places for him because they're the same places people start with Jesus today. Peter, like many today, may have been looking for a political Jesus. He, like many today, may have been looking for a social Jesus. Or maybe, like many today, he was looking for an emotional Jesus. He may, like a lot of people in the South do today, he may have been looking for a family Jesus. Now, whatever kind of Jesus Peter was looking for, it was not the Jesus that is revealed in scriptures to us. You see, he had Jesus' title correct, but he really didn't know what that meant. It reminds me of that classic line in the movie The Princess Bride. You keep using that word, but I don't think it means what you think it means. And so, like many of us today, Peter revealed his misunderstanding. He did not understand the mission that Jesus came to fulfill. He didn't understand that after Jesus led a sinless life on earth, that he had to die a sacrificial death for our sin to fulfill all of the Jewish law and all of the prophecies in the Bible. He didn't understand that after that happened, Jesus would then have to arise from the dead and defeat death and hell for all those who trust in him. And because of his lack of understanding, Peter was shocked that Jesus predicted his own death. And this burst the bubble that Peter's misunderstanding had created for him. His lack of understanding was revealed when he had the audacity to rebuke his master, his rabbi, his Lord. This was not only unheard of, but it was also unseemly. Peter was sharp with Jesus to the point of being rude. The only good thing in this situation, from Peter's standpoint, was that he took Jesus aside so that he wouldn't be embarrassed publicly. I remember my own life when, as a preteen, I had an argument with my uncle about how an automatic transmission worked. Now, I didn't take my uncle off to the side. We were at a family gathering, and I was with my cousins and my dad and some other folks, and I didn't even have a driver's license at that time. And actually, I had never even seen a car with an automatic transmission at that time. My family had a manual car, yet I had the audacity to argue with my uncle, who had been driving automatic transmissions for years and years and years and years. Peter, as John Q. Prodigal, may have been mistaken about Jesus, but he was never in doubt. And sometimes I resemble that remark. Ouch. Finally, however, in the end, Peter did find Jesus because Jesus set Peter straight. Only one true gospel exists, and no other gospel will do. Any other truth out there is of Satan, and any other way is the path to destruction. Among theologians, a debate has existed for many years about whether salvation is a decision or a process. I believe we see for Peter it was both. Peter decided to follow Jesus, but he failed to understand the Jesus that he had followed. And this led to Peter becoming as rebellious and wayward in his attitude as the prodigal son was. Jesus, like the prodigal's father, was patient. He did not give up on Peter, and nor, thank God does he give up on us? In the end, Peter, John Q. Prodigal, did find Jesus. So he's a great example for us to follow. If we seek the true Jesus, we will find him. If we seek to follow him, he will let us and he will teach us all that we need to know. Are we like Peter today? Are we seeking to fill a God-shaped hole in our souls? Well, let us seek Jesus today, and we will find that he perfectly fills that empty spot in our lives. Thanks so much for visiting with me today. I'll be back soon with another word from the Bible that we can share together. Every blessing. I'm Dr. Otis Corbett.